China has the world's largest number of warships. It has 370 battle force ships. That's the world's largest navy. That's a lot of warships. But where it's really deficient is in the underwater realm. It has only 6 to 8 nuclear-powered attack submarines, or SSNs. Now, to give you an idea how small that number is, the US Navy, which China is competing with, has 50 nuclear-powered attack submarines. That's a lot of SSNs. In fact, the US Navy has as many SSNs, if not more, than the entire world put together. That's right. It has more SSNs than the navies of France, Great Britain, Russia, and of course, China put together. But now China is closing that gap. In the last couple of years, it's launched an explosive growth program for its SSN fleet. It's believed to be constructing over a dozen of its new 093B submarines. It's launching and building something like 4 to 5 of these attack submarines every year. And it's projected to rapidly expand its numbers to catch up to the US Navy. Now, I'm joined today by Rear Admiral Monty Khanna, former submariner, naval veteran, and a very close watcher of the Chinese submarine fleet. He closely tracks their numbers, their building, their construction programs, and he writes extensively. Admiral Khanna, welcome to News 9.
Thanks, Sandeep. Glad to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Admiral Khanna, what explains China's explosive growth in SSN construction? Has the PLA Navy suddenly woken up to the power of the SSN?
I would say that this is not something really recent. Maybe the expansion and growth is recent, but if you see, China started off with their Han class SSN program in 1968, building 5 boats, and thereafter they changed over to the 093 Shangs, of which they built maybe between 6 to 8. If you see, some people say 6 and some people say 8, so somewhere in between, probably. Now, while building these boats, they went through an iterative improvement cycle. With the Hans, they were quite small, 4.5 to 5.5 thousand tons. The Shanks went up to between 6 to 7 thousand tons. Further improvements made on silencing, further improvements made. And this was an iterative improvement cycle where if you see the Shanks, the first two which came were slightly different from the next two, and the next two improved even further. So there was an iterative improvement and development that took place. And this has been China's philosophy even insofar as their surface ships are concerned. If you take the destroyer fleet, for example, the 051s and the 052s, the 051s are actually all steam powered and the 052s gas turbine powered. So first came the 051, 052s, which they built a small number of. Then came the Alphas, the Bravos, in which they built ones and twos only of each. Then they dumped steam and decided to go for gas turbine. And they went into the 052 Charlies, for which they built 6. And once they sort of worked out the problems over there, then they went in for the 052 Delta or the Kunming class for the Luyang 3. And that was a stable design, which they mass produced in huge numbers, which they've already built 35 of and building more. So I think we've reached the same inflection point insofar as submarines are concerned, where after many rounds of, iterative design improvements, they've reached a stage where they're confident of what they can produce. And hence you're finding this, explosive growth, I would say, in the number of 053 Bravos or the new SSGNs, which are coming out right now. And to coincide with this, they've increased the capacities of their production capability. So if you see the new development which has taken place in Hurudao shipyard towards the east, they've reclaimed the last vast tract of land. And between, I think, 2018 or 2019 and 2022, 2023, they, they really enhanced the construction facilities over there, where you now have, for the SSN construction itself, you have 12 final assembly halls, and for the SSBN construction, another 8 final assembly halls. And this compares with only around 3 to 4 they had earlier. So you can just see the capacities that they have created, and therefore you're seeing these numbers which are being churned out right now.
Right, amazing. I mean, it's explosive. I think this is possibly the largest growth of nuclear-powered attack submarines, possibly, definitely since the end of the Cold War, but possibly even further behind that. I think it's probably only the Soviet Union that had these many number of submarines at any given point of time.
Actually, during the Cold War, both the Soviet Union and the US were building large numbers. So launching between 6 to 8 submarines. In fact, I think in certain years they went up even to, I think the Soviet Union did even 10 submarines in a year on certain years.
Right.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, between 1945 and 1991, uh, the USSR launched roughly around 235 nuclear boats. And the US in the same period did around 211 or 212, somewhere over there. So these were large building cycles, but they went through. But I think what was really different is that in the Soviet Union, they had four building yards that were doing this. And in the US, they had, in fact, seven nuclear submarine building yards. In China, this is all happening in one yard in Uludao. It's really concentration of all effort that has taken place on one site and all the activities happening
Right.
over there.
Right. Absolutely. So, Admiral Khanna, what else do we know about China's, undersea nuclear reactor prowess? I mean, their reactors were low enriched uranium. They used LEU, and they typically had issues of maintenance and reliability. Have they managed to crack the naval nuclear reactor technology? What do we know about the new generation nuclear reactors for these new boats that they've started building?
So frankly, not much. There's not much there in the open domain, and whatever might be known by certain countries is kept tightly under the wraps. But one can speculate. And the speculation is based on, once you go into series production and once you're sure you're building up in large numbers, then I think it would be fair to assume that most of the earlier issues that plague their reactors have been resolved. And now they have a stable design. Uh, should also assume that it is reasonably quiet, that you have at least up to low speeds. You can be a not, natural circulation for where convection really works, and your primary heat transfer pumps don't have to kick in. These pumps tend to be noisy. At what speed they kick in is always, something that people keep as a closely guarded secret. At what speed your heat transfer pumps have to kick in. But one would assume that they've, licked a lot of these problems, and that is the reason why I would say that they have really gone into series production. And it's not only, I mean, you have to see this with what's happening on the civil side. So if you see what's happening on the civil side, I mean, the largest growth of nuclear power plants, which is happening in China right now. They've got a stable, 1,000 megawatt or 1,200 megawatt design, which, they're exporting to different countries also. So I'm sure, civil being, the real strength of China, that there is a lot of collaboration, cooperation, which is happening in these two fields as well. And it would be, I would say, dangerous to assume that this is an immature design and their submarines are not, at least capable.
Right, absolutely. And the fact that they've launched so many of the 093 Bs, between 6 and 9 is what we're hearing in the numbers. That would suggest
Yeah.
that they are confident in the reactor that powers them. But what else do we know, Admiral Khanna, about the expansion in their basing of all these submarines? What about the crew, the manpower training? These are issues that you've been looking at very closely.
So, I mean, one can again only assume, but if you see, they used to have the old uh, submarine academy, the Naval Submarine Academy, the NSA one that was located in Qingdao, quite a mature institution which has been existing right from the days, that the submarine arm was formed in 19, soon after 1949, when the Chinese Navy was formed, and the submarine arm came into being. Uh, but after that, around 50 kilometers away, they set up a brand new submarine academy. And I mean, the scope of that facility is immense. To my mind, it will be the largest building in an academic institution in the world that is set up over there. If I recollect correctly, it roughly is around 7 to 800 meters from end to end. I think a little more. 8 to 900 meters, I think, from end to end is the length of that building itself. And there are two parallel buildings, one behind the other. So from an infra standpoint, I think they've made sure that they are, keeping pace with the growth in numbers. The other issue, of course, is you building submarines in large numbers. How are you going to sort of berth them is the other issue. Do you have adequate harbors? I mean, they have two large submarine bases. That is the nuclear submarine base one in Jiangezhuang, which is just south of Qingdao, and the other has been the subbase two, which is in Hainan, yeah, in Longpo. And the Longbow one had initially three birds when it was built. Then they added one more for piers, and now they've added two more. So they've got six piers over there. And in there's been some expansion which has taken place in Jiangezhuang as well. So in both these birds, you see, in both these harbors, you're seeing expansion of number of piers. And plus, both have tunnel complexes where you can, keep these submarines inside. But I don't think that's going to be enough because if you see the number, the growth that is, happening right now. So there has to be a third facility. That's what, one has been speculating that there should be a third base. And I think we're seeing the signs of that third base in Yulin, which is just around 8 or 10 kilometers away from Longpo, where you have five new piers coming up, finger piers, very similar to what they use for all the other submarines. And I think that's going to be the third nuclear base. But this is all, of course, in China. If you want to deploy these submarines, far, then there are many other, I would say, uh, boxes that need to be ticked if you want to regularly deploy these submarines in the Indian Ocean.
Right, absolutely. Yes. So that was my next question, Admiral Khanna, the fact that how many submarines could China potentially deploy in the Indian Ocean region? They started in 2013 with that first patrol by a Shank-class SSN in December of 2013. Um, by when would you think they would have the kind of numbers in SSNs to start projecting them, say, outwards on patrols into the IOR, which is our immediate concern?
Yeah, so I don't think numbers is the issue. Even now, if you've got out of the five Han class, if you say the first two or three are decommissioned, you've got a couple of them left, and you've got around, say, between 6 to 8 Shanks. And as the Bravo's numbers increase, of course, then newer, so much more reliable submarines. So in that way, it certainly helps. But geography makes things difficult, of course, for them because now if you are willing to come on surface, then you can come through maybe you can come through Malacca, you can come through Sunda, transiting Lombok even on surface or at periscope depth. It can be done in a pinch, slightly hazardous. But if you want to come submerged, then you're looking at by Vatar, which is so you're looking at 5,000 6,000 mile journey to get over here. So you're burning up a lot of endurance while coming over here. So if you have to come here, operate for a couple of months and go back, a large part of that, time is going to be spent coming up and down. The way you can resolve that issue is you have some sort of permanent basing in the Indian Ocean. So I think that is really the
Absolutely.
key. Is permanent basing in the Indian
That was
Ocean
going to
where
be
you
my
can.
next question. So, if you're going to cut down on transit time, you would need bases in the IOR. So, what to your
Yeah.
mind are potential Chinese bases in the Indian Ocean region? Would it be, say, Pakistan or, for that matter, Bangladesh, where they've built a base for the Bangladesh Navy's Romeo class SSKs? Could those be potential bases?
Yeah, so the Mings have gone into Bangladesh and they've gone into Pekua. And so Pekua is there. But I would still say to regularly, for a submarine to come, to turn around, to do a little bit of an R&R and to go out is one thing. What you call, this place is not basis concept. But if you're going to station a submarine, an attack submarine on a permanent basis in Bangladesh, then Bangladesh would have some pretty stiff answering to do to a large number of countries apart from India. And I'm not too sure whether they'd like to cross that Rubicon. So it would be complicated. In a pinch, maybe, if there was a pressing requirement, then you can sort of burn up a lot of your political capital to make that happen. But otherwise, I think it would be difficult for them to do. Myanmar that way, maybe, given, of course, it's a, a mixed relationship that they have with China, but I think the leverage on Myanmar is much greater. So I think in Myanmar, there are greater options. Djibouti is always available to you, but Djibouti is complicated. You've got everyone there. You've got the Americans, you've got the French, you've got the Japanese. Everyone is cheek and jowl in Djibouti. Pakistan is available. Pakistan's got its own set of problems, where, if you see whenever a Chinese ship, warship pulls into any either Karachi or, the amount of force protection that they have to do in double wall containers and entry and exit restrictions, etc. So there's a huge, internal security issue that they have to contend with over there. So they are fraught with issues right now. I would suspect that, if they're looking for a base, an ideal location would be somewhere in the Southwest Indian Ocean. So if you're looking at countries like Madagascar, Comoros, Mozambique, Tanzania, this to my mind is going to be the area that, the Chinese are really going to focus on because it gives them a lot more options if you can build a facility over there that can support your nuclear submarines.
What are the kind of infrastructure requirements to support nuclear powered submarines in these countries that you mentioned? How much of basing facilities would have to be created from scratch?
So it depends again what sort of a footprint you want to do. One way you can short circuit that is that you bring a submarine depot ship now, and China's got a large number of them. So a lot of that infrastructure is there resident of the platform itself. So that platform comes along with you, the workshops, the torpedo preparation rooms, all that sort of is resident in the platform itself.
Yeah.
And therefore you can, short circuit this entire process by bringing in a lot of it in a float requirement itself. And as you sort of, once you start this, then you can start, iteratively, I would say, increasing your footprint in that country concerned, wherever the base comes up. You know, uh, these submarine, so-called submarine depot ships, we used to have Amba, for example. I think they can go a long way in aiding this process until you have adequate, robust facilities ashore to support submarines on a long-term basis.
Right. Admiral Khanna, do we have any idea of the number of nuclear powered attack submarines that the Chinese have projected? But there are estimates of something like 16 to 18 of the O93Bs. But I mean, given the fact that they are a peer-to-peer competitor with the United States, would a number of 50 be completely unreasonable?
I don't think it would be unreasonable at all. See, right now they're running at a drumbeat of roughly one boat every 4 months. Okay, some people might say that that this is every 4 to 5 months. Let's say you're building
Yeah.
between 2 to 3 boats a year, right? And if you've created the building infrastructure to support this, and this is I'm not talking about SSBNs because SSBNs, that the other facility where they have the 8 final assembly halls is yet to start churning out boats. This is only attack submarines. So 2 to 3 boats per year, and if you take the average life of a boat as 25 years, so you're talking between 50 to 75 boats. If you continue building at the pace that you're doing right now. So I think between 50 to 75 boats is the numbers that we should be looking at.
50 to 75 boats in the next 2 decades, which is by 2040 or
Yeah, so
thereabouts.
yeah, for the entire system to stabilize, let's say 25 years, so we look at the next 2.5 decades. Yeah.
So that's a large number of submarines. But there's this a lot of internet speculation. There have been some statements from the Pakistan Navy, retired veterans, of course, saying that they could, hire or rent a Chinese nuclear-powered attack submarine of the kind of the relationship that we have with the Russian Federation. You see that in the realm of possibility, the fact that China could loan the Pakistan Navy, a nuclear powered attack submarine, possibly one of their older ones as they get newer subs.
Yeah, I would say it's very plausible. In a sense, it would serve. Firstly, of course, we've done it. AUKUS is essentially going to allow Australia to do the same until they start building their own AUKUS cores.
Right.
So this sort of, I would say, nuclear submarines, being leased out to other countries, it seems to be getting mainstreamed right now. And it would be in China's, it would be advantageous to China to do that for two reasons. Firstly, of course, they complicate things for us. So that is, keep us slightly unbalanced is always, from a Chinese perspective, I think that be a positive. And the second positive would be is that the basing infrastructure for their boats starts coming up automatically in Pakistan itself. So uh, it always gives you that option. Now, if you can sort out your internal security issues, and if you can, but that once the basic infrastructure comes up, then at least you know that should push come to shove, those facilities are going to be available for you in case you have a problem.
So you actually killed two birds with one stone if you lease
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
an in-service unit to the Pakistan Navy.
yeah,
So you have facility for your submarine as well. But is
yeah.
there are you seeing anything of the sort? I mean, you studied a lot of satellite imagery to write your pieces, very well-informed pieces. I must compliment you on them. Uh, are you seeing any activity on the ground to suggest that there is an expansion of facilities in Pakistan to accommodate nuclear submarines or, house them, base them, even temporarily?
So not as yet. Again, the easy way to do about it in short term is that you bring in a submarine depot ship along with you, and maybe in a relatively short span of time, at least, you can compress that timeline that is required for conversion. Karachi is, of course, a busy place, but certainly Ormara and Gwadar can be used for this purpose. But I think in the long term, if China is seriously looking at Pakistan as an option for basing, then they would need to set up a greenfield base in a relatively unpopulated area, a hard perimeter base. Uh, there are many such locations that you can see on the Makarand coastline where you can set up something. I'm sure Pakistan will be glad and be quite supportive of this entire effort. So if you identify a place and then you build a harbor and you have a hard perimeter base, and this you don't have to mess around with the local population because there's if it's non-resident in that area, then I think that is a better option than trying to convert an existing facility, for their own exclusive use. Otherwise, dual use, of course, you can do that.
Right. So a greenfield project is something that seems probable or even possible in the not too
Yeah,
distant future. But that would
yeah,
be a Rubicon that would have to be crossed, like you mentioned the case of Bangladesh as well. If Pakistan starts sheltering Chinese nuclear submarines in our backyard, like literally a few dozen kilometers away, then that is a Rubicon that would have been crossed.
yeah. But I think Pakistan has already crossed several Rubicons in this respect, if you ask
Yes.
me. So I think in that sense, it would be easier for Pakistan to make this sort of and their dependency on Pakistan, on China is already large on all
Yes.
sorts of platforms. So I think this would be, of course, the downside of doing that is that I think you'll be, even though their relationship with the US has been tenuous from time to time, but that relationship exists. But if you do that, then I think you've clearly taken a side in this respect, and it would be, difficult for them to preserve any semblance of a relationship with the Western world, should that happen. Yeah, so they'll have to sort of take
Right.
that into consideration.
Right. And in conclusion, Admiral Khanna, we're talking a lot of numbers in terms of, 40 submarines, 50 submarines, 60 submarines. The Chinese, I'm sure numbers, quantity is not
Yeah.
a problem for the Chinese at all. What about quality? When it comes to tactics, training, deployment, mission profiles and all of that, which the
Yeah.
United States is far ahead of the rest of the world, you can say, in SSN
Yeah.
tactics. How long will it take the Chinese to actually catch up with this?
So, a few years back, we used to say that it will take the Chinese, decades to learn carrier aviation. You
Yeah,
know, that, this is a long-term art that requires years and years of effort. And if you want to do non-diversionary flying, if you want to do nighttime flying, etc., this is, it's not going to happen in the next, 10 years. This is going to be really a long, drawn-out process. Now it's a different world. You've seen it, they're already doing all this, it's become routine for them to do night operations, non-diversionary operations, etc. So the more resources you throw at a problem, the more you can compress that timeline until which for making it an effective force. Now I agree, of course, it's a challenge for them. It's a challenge for them. And because, they're late starters and therefore they will have to throw a lot of resources at it. But I think they might even partially get a certain amount of assistance from the Russians in this respect also. So there's a large amount of resident information over there, which maybe they can tap into that resource also. to try and circumvent and to try and sort of short circuit this entire process to become more capable. Russians are experienced, submarine operators in that perspective. So all that put together, uh, using a lot of your own resources, tap whatever resources you've got. In terms of, conventional submarine operations, I think one learning curve for them, of course, is Pakistan. That is another resource that they have because Pakistan has been operating conventional boats at least for a long time. So they have fewer options, I would say. But if you are willing to devote resources, I think then you can significantly compress that time.
Admiral Khanna, thank you very much for that amazing overview of China's submarine building capability. And of course, that is a subject that we'll be covering very closely because it has implications on India's strategy for the Indian Ocean region. Thank you very much for joining us.